Hello, welcome to A Life Without Parole. Speaking of a life without parole, I just went to a sentencing hearing for Lori Vallow Daybell, who basically just received a life without parole. And I want to talk about my full experience while I was there. Now, for those of you who don't know, Lori Vallow Daybell was convicted, charged, and sentenced for the death of her two children, JJ and Tylee, and also conspiracy to commit murder for the wife of her fifth husband, Chad Daybell, Tammy Daybell. The sentencing was crazy. Let me just say this. There were so many people that have really gotten into this story, and I personally have been so interested in this because I was born and raised in Southeast Idaho, which is where the murders took place. I felt personally tied to this, and I know that other Idahoans feel the same, and actually people all around the world feel like justice needed to be served for her. And we'll talk about what the justice was in a minute. But first, I just wanted to explain what it was like to actually go to the sentencing and the rat race that it was around. Okay, so let me jump right in. So I drove to Idaho Sunday and I got a later start than I would have liked. So I wasn't getting there in time to be first in line, so to speak. So I'd kind of just decided, maybe I won't. Maybe I'll just try to go Monday morning and take my chances at getting in, or I'll just watch it on the live stream. But I knew that I wanted to be at the courthouse because I've already gone to one of the trial days and it really affected me, and I just kind of wanted to be there for the end. I wanted to see it through. I As I was going there Sunday afternoon, I wanted to scout around and see all the sites of everything that we've been hearing about and seeing on TV and whatnot. Even though I'm from Southeast Idaho, I hadn't been to Chad Daybell's property ever in my life, so to speak, or the county jail. So I drove with my sister. We went first to Chad Daybell's property, and that was an interesting thing. When I arrived at Chad Daybell's property, it was very surreal. I have to say, I thought it looked the same, and yet it kind of looked different. I did notice that off in the grass, there were some ducks just walking along, and it made me think of Tammy. And in a way, seeing these ducks, it was sort of a gut punch of the reality of the situation that there was a lovely lady who lived here and took care of ducks in a garden in a yard. For the most ridiculous reason, she is no more on this earth taking care of her lovely home. It's hard to imagine that this is real, not a movie, not made up. This is the reality of what happened here. Lori has been charged with conspiracy to commit murder of Tammy. 2 weeks after Tammy died in this home, Lori married her fifth husband, Chad Daybell. He has been charged with murder, and his trial begins April 1st, 2024. Lori's also been convicted of the death of her two children, Tylee and JJ, who were found buried on Chad's property. As I was looking over this property, I was trying to get a feel for where everything is compared to what I've seen on TV. I couldn't quite figure out where it was. Then I ran into my friend Gigi from Pretty Lies and Alibis. I met her at the courthouse in Boise when I attended Lori's trial, and she was able to show me exactly where the bodies were buried. So as you look over this property, see this tree right here? That is what we call JJ's tree. He was buried under that tree. And then when you look right here at this fire pit, that is where Tylee's body was buried. I guess I was a little bit shocked when I looked over this property to see that everything looks back to normal. It's kind of business as usual. Looks like they're ready at any given minute to start a fire and sit around and roast marshmallows, I suppose.
I don't know. It's shocking to me that the family can just go on after such a tragedy. I guess what else do you do? It's an interesting thing. I did see that the memorials are across the street because, from my understanding, the Daybell children do not want any memorials on their fence line. And in fact, someone came out as we were filming and started filming us. Did not seem to be happy that we were there. Just a little side note. It's really interesting to think, what would you do if you were in this situation? I'm trying my best not to judge because I don't know what I would do. My only opinion is that we give the Daybell children the benefit of the doubt in this situation because we have to remember they are victims too. We don't know why they are not having a relationship with Tammy's family because obviously Tammy's family also were victims. As we were standing outside the home, I was talking with Gigi about it, and we both just really can't figure it out.
And I met her at the trial in Boise. If you see my video before, you know that I I had a bit of a coughing fit during the trial and basically got a tickle in my throat, started coughing. It's a long story, but the bottom line is she was so kind to give me a cough drop, and then after that we were talking, and so anyway, it was fun to see her. But when I got to the property, I realized that it looks so different today than it did in the helicopter view that we had when Tylee and JJ were discovered. And I don't know, it was very solemn. It was very solemn to be there. I found out from Gigi that there had already been 30 people in line over at the courthouse, and they're suspecting that there would be about 30 seats available. So I knew that I'd already kind of missed it for getting a seat inside the courthouse. But I still decided to drive over there and kind of look at it. So when I got over there, there were a lot of news, you know, a lot of people in line. And I just was walking around, and my sister said, "You know what? You should just try it. Who knows? You might be able to get in." As I was talking to a few people, they had, there was rumor mill going around that some of the people who were going to do witness statements weren't going to do them after all. They were just going to send them in. So there were going to be extra seats available, possibly. There was no way to know how many jurors were going to show up, and they were going to get a certain amount of seats, but if jurors didn't show up, there'd be more seats and whatever. I just decided, you know what? I'm going to stay the night. So I went and I got myself a ticket. And this is part of what I want to explain. It's an interesting thing to go. And so somebody at the back of the line, when I was going to get in line, said, you go to the front of the line and you can get a ticket. So I go to the front of the line, to get my ticket, and I'm number 43, and I get my ticket. And you know what it was? A white piece of paper and somebody writing with a marker the number. And I was like, this seems a little, I didn't know that's the way the ticketing system was going to be, but all right, 43. They suspect there's going to be about 30 able to get in, and I'm number 43. So my chances of getting in are pretty slim. But again, I just decided, I don't know, I'll take my chances. Maybe. Then I heard that some of the news people were even after me, and they're like trying to get a shorter number. And I heard people up the line saying, "I'll sell you my ticket for $500" or whatever. It was kind of jovial to think about. I hate to say jovial, but it was interesting. And anyway, no takers. But there were some of the media who paid someone to sit for them so that they could come in the morning. And good for them. That's what I think. Good for them, because there weren't specifically media seats. And especially when you're talking about somebody like Nate Eaton, who, if it wasn't for him, who knows where we'd be. He deserves to be in that courthouse, in my opinion. Nate took the flyers of JJ and Tylee and went to Hawaii and started asking around because he got a tip, and this is what he came across.
Tell me where your kids are. Where are your kids? No comment. No comment? They've been missing for 4 months. You have nothing to say? You're over here in Hawaii? Where are your children? Why don't you just give us a comment? Just tell us where they are. Chad, where are Lori's kids? What happened to Tammy, Chad?
I'm dying to look at Chad's expression and smile on his face right after he's asked the question, what happened to Tammy, your wife?
Can you tell us what happened to Tammy? Why have you guys been in Hawaii for so long? Listen, just tell people what's happening. There's people around the country praying for your children, praying for you guys. Why don't you give us answers?
That's great.
That's great. That's great that they're praying for you, praying for your kids. What? You have nothing to say? Did you do something to your children? Are your children still alive? That's a simple question. I've got 3 kids of my own. I can tell you every minute where my kids are at. Where are your children? What do you guys plan to do now? You have 5 days to get your children in front of a judge in Rexburg, then what? Are you guys innocent of any crimes? Have you committed any crimes? Chad, you guys have a lot to say on your podcast. You don't have anything to say now? Lori? Do you believe that you were instructed by God or others to do something for your children? If you could give a message to them, what would you say? Listen, if you just talk to us, we'll leave you alone.
The family's worried. Tammy's family's very worried.
Tammy's family's very worried. Lori, your mother, Kay, came out. Kay and Larry, they're offering a $20,000 reward for your children. And you're over here on the beach?
And again, it's very interesting. We now know that Kay and Larry were actually her husband's sister and her sister's husband. And Lori was furious at her because she got the life insurance policy when Charles was killed.
This is your chance to tell your story. Nothing you want to say?
He deserves to be in that courthouse, in my opinion. And not to mention Justin Lum or like Lauren from Hidden to Crime or Gigi, my friend. I just feel like, yeah, I don't blame them one bit for paying someone to sit there through the night so that they could have a seat in the courthouse. I should have thought of it. But again, my whole thing was I wanted to be there. So, okay, I didn't come prepared. I didn't have my lawn chair and all the things that I said I was going to do because I assumed I wasn't going to go. So my sister said, "Oh, I'll go get it from my place, clear back in Blackfoot, which is quite a distance, and bring it back to you, and you can just hold your place in line." So I'm like, okay. So she left, came back about an hour later. She actually went and got my niece, who's in Idaho Falls, and she came with everything I could possibly need. She brought a sleeping bag, a chair, a comfy blanket, a lunch pail full of snacks. And I had been telling my sister that I did not get my hair ready for the day because I didn't think that I was going to be staying overnight. And so she brought her hair supply things and she's like, "Don't worry, I got you." And she put my hair in French braids and said, "In the morning, you just pull those braids out and your hair will be perfect." So at one point, we just sat on the grass, and this was probably 11 o'clock at night by the time this is happening. And she braided my hair. And anyway, so I was ready. I was ready to stay the night. So let me tell you about what the scuttlebutt was around. So when you are sitting in line, basically, once you have your ticket, you don't have to just sit there in line the whole night because everyone just agreed we would honor the order that we got there. And so everyone could kind of go where they wanted as long as they sort of stayed on the property. I did hear that a few people actually got their tickets and left, stayed in a hotel, came back in the morning, stood back in line. Look, it's self-governing. Do what you want, right? I guess. And those people were directly in front of me and they didn't actually get in, nor did I, which I'll tell you that in a minute. But what was interesting was the fact that it's self-governing, the order system. So I was joking afterwards and I was like, it's kind of like Lord of the Flies around there, you know, it's majority rule. whatever happens, it's majority rule. It's not like you have security there saying, no, this is how it is, or some official person. So, but again, it was a lot better than just trying to hold your place in line for 24 hours or however long, And the majority of the people there were like people like me. They were just interested parties who wanted to know, or YouTubers or news or whatever, whatever your reason for being there didn't really matter. It seemed fair that the order that you came is the order you're going to go in. So we all agreed to do that. Well, one thing that was interesting was over and over throughout the night, different news agencies throughout the country would come and video, and they'd ask people, can I do an interview with you? And I was like, okay, sure. And I think I got on 4 different lives. I don't even know where. I know one was Southeast Idaho News, but I don't even know who else that I was on. I'm like, oh, I should have prepared better for that. But anyway, they were just curious. Why would we be standing in line? What, you get it if you're a news anchor, why you would, but what about the rest of us? Why were we there? And that's the question I'm going to answer. Like, obviously, I've given my reasoning for why I was there, but I want to talk about what some of the other people, what was their reasoning for being there. And I think you're going to find this pretty interesting. There were some things that I learned throughout the night, and that's one thing about staying up all night with fellow ticketers. You learn a lot. I don't know if I mentioned, but I didn't sleep good the night before. So this was going to be 2 nights in a row of no sleep and then a court case. I will admit right now, go and sit in my car for a couple hours, somewhere between 1 and 3 a.m., and maybe dozed off for a little bit because I was just beyond measure exhausted. But mostly I was there. So here's what I've learned. I'll just tell you, and everything that I'm saying can't be used in court because it's hearsay, right? Someone told me and I'm telling you, and I'm not verifying any of it. It's just, you just put it in that for what it's worth category. And we know that, just in Lori's sentencing, she told this whopper of stories that are easy to verify. I'm going to talk about that. I know, but whoppers. So I'm not saying that people couldn't be telling whoppers to me as I was talking to them, but I'm just saying I couldn't see any reason why the stories that they were telling didn't seem to be, there would be no reason to tell this lie. Okay, so first of all, the first thing that I thought was really interesting, I met someone whose daughter was in school where Tammy was a librarian and her son Garth was a teacher. And I got to talk to her and hear the perspective from like a local person that was tied with that school district. And what was the thinking behind what happened when Tammy died? And I think it was interesting that everyone immediately had bells going off in their head. Let me just put it that way. Because they knew Tammy, they knew she was fine the day before, and the thing that they were told at the school was that she had a cough in the night and passed away in her sleep. That's what they were told. And that does sound ridiculous to all involved, right? It seems crazy. Who dies in their sleep over a cough? So there's the first thing. The second thing was I talked to somebody who's closely tied, and I'm not going to name names, I'm just saying closely tied to the coroner. And it's interesting how in these small little communities throughout the country, a coroner can be elected to a position, and it has nothing to do with training or background or anything. It's an elected position. So when you understand that, then you can understand how, there was no autopsy done because they're not trained to be able to catch all the things. This isn't LA where a lot of murders happen. Let's just face it. I don't know when the last murder happened in that area, but it's not a common occurrence. So, people were saying, but what about the bruising? There was bruising and There was whatever. Look, she didn't know how to tell the signs. So there's that. Then there was the whole, why was the funeral, why did it happen so fast? Why was, why? All those things that we've all been wondering. And we're just like, what did the people who were friends with the Daybells think about that? Are you telling me you weren't suspicious of Chad right then, even before you know any of the other things? Wouldn't you be suspicious? And the answer is, again, I talked with somebody who was a close friend with the Daybells, particularly Tammy. And I mean close friend. She was not even informed about Tammy's death till she was in the ground. She was one who was in the inside circle. And Chad didn't like her because she wasn't drinking his Kool-Aid, let's just say. So she wasn't invited. She wasn't invited to the services, and she didn't know anything about it. So anybody who was really on the inside was not allowed to raise flags other than, the ones that we've heard of already. Okay, so having said that, you understand how that all happened. Oh, this is one thing that I was wondering. What about the congregation at the church where Chad went? Now, you know that he was starting his own cult, his own church of the firstborn, but he was pretending to still be in a different congregation. And that's where he was recruiting people for his church to be part of the 144,000, join the elite group. He was recruiting heavily from his own congregation. And ironically, he was still going to his own congregation as if we call it a wolf in sheep's clothing, because he wasn't believing in the doctrine of that church. He was literally, I mean, if it was known what his beliefs were, he would have been excommunicated from that church, but he held it quiet. And he would go to each person. And to be honest with you, uh, that whole thing that happened, I was able to meet with someone who was closely tied, and I'm going to be doing an interview with her very shortly, very soon, and it is going to be amazing. I got a lot of insights about that. And that one, I will let her be the one to explain it, because I'm not going to do the hearsay thing here today because it's in depth. There's so much, so much to talk about. So that will be coming soon. So get ready for that. But basically, let me just give you just a little soft version of how someone could fall, or Chad would think they would fall, for his con. That's all I can say. His con. That's what it is to me. Um, so apparently, okay, so this is one of the ladies who told me that she was just walking down the hall during church meetings, and there's like 2 hours of meetings, and it was in between, like you're in one chapel and then you break and you go to different classes. Everyone goes to different Sunday school classes. And as she was walking to her Sunday school class, Chad approached her. And this was well before any of the murders or any of that had happened. But he approached her and said that he'd had a vision about her, and that he would like to talk to her after church and let her know what the Lord wanted her to do, something along those lines. And as I'm talking to this lady who had this happen to her, I'm like, okay. And what did you think about that at the time? What did you think about personally? What did you think about him? What did you think about your own beliefs in your religious system and him saying that? Like all those things. These are the questions I've been dying to ask people who were around him. And, well, her answer was, I thought he was crackers, and I just chose to have nothing to do with him from then on out. If I saw him coming, I avoided him like the plague. Now, I think we all have people in our lives, not necessarily at church, but it could even be somebody from the workplace or somebody from a friend group or whatever, that says kooky things. And you're just like, ooh, yeah, like cuckoo alert, and you don't necessarily then think, oh, they're going to murder people. You just go, oh, that person's got delusions. Know anybody else who has delusions? And she just avoided him. That was that. So, okay, there's my another example. Okay, so before I tell some more examples, I want to talk about what it was like to be there. Now, the one thing that I noticed was I had this feeling of kind of excitement, and I'm embarrassed to say, but kind of happy, because I guess I've just felt so much anxiety over this for so long and so sickened by it. The day that I was in court was the day they revealed how the children died. And oh, that's been so upsetting to me. And I just can't even fathom how a mother could do that. And so once she was found guilty, again, just sick, sick, sick. So to me, to actually finally be at what I'm calling Judgment Day, I felt happy. I felt happy and excited because I felt like finally there's going to be some justice for what has happened. And Lori is going to have to face the music. So I was feeling really happy about it. Anyway, I was sitting next to somebody and found out she felt the same. And pretty soon, just like everyone had been really solemn and quiet, just talking to somebody they may know, or like everyone's just like, you don't know these people. I mean, some people came in groups of like 4, but most of us were there on our own, and you don't know how to react. And the other thing is, I didn't know who's on whose side, so to speak. Like, are these people like pro justice for Tylee and I have my little bracelet? I'll tell that in a minute. Or are these people all about Tammy Daybell, thinking that Chad was wrongfully, charged? Or are these people what I'm going to call from the prepper group? I don't know. And if they are from the prepper group, where do they stand now? So I was just trying to kind of go around, feel my way out. I didn't want to get in any confrontations or expose my card of where I stand. Um, so I just was very careful. But little by little by little, I would meet one person and then the next person and the next person, and then realize, okay, the only ones here staying the night, waiting for a trial, are basically in 2 categories. That's what I'm going to call 2 categories. They're either from the press and some sort of, news agency, or they want to see justice. That's all I saw. Now, if there was anybody who was secretly wanting Lori to walk free, or secretly wanting this to not tie in with Chad Daybell at all, I didn't see them. Certainly didn't hear anything from them. There were maybe 3 or 4 people that stayed really quiet the entire time, really quiet. They didn't tell stories, they didn't talk within the group. And so I was keeping my eye on them just to see. But even by the time the whole trial was over, I saw that they were celebrating with the verdict, with not the verdict, with the sentencing. So, yeah, that was that. But I was really hoping that I would meet someone who was in that prepping group where Chad would go around, where Lori and Chad met, blah, blah, blah. And didn't meet them that night. But I did in the morning, and I'll tell about that. But let me finish this. Okay, so the one thing I forgot, I got to back up. The one thing that I forgot to talk about when I went to Chad Daybell's property, after we were getting in our car, getting ready to drive away, all of a sudden, I see that we're being recorded. Somebody who's on the property has their phone out and they're recording us, recording them, and I was like, oh, I didn't even realize that. And then this guy started coming towards us, like zooming in on us, and it was like, oh, what? And then even when we were in our car and driving away, he was like, I don't know. It was kind of scary and aggressive. And I mean, I can't even imagine. And that's when I started to think, if you are in the perspective of one of Chad Daybell's kids, and let's say that you believe that he didn't do this, that Lori did it. I'm not exactly sure how you could possibly believe that, but let's just say you do, then it would be awful to be sitting there in the home watering your garden and have this many people videoing your house, your property, your where you live. So I'm really trying to have compassion on them. But I also recognize, and then it was brought out even in the statements from Tammy Daybell's family, that they are estranged from Chad's kids. There's no communication. Even though grandma just passed away, the kids did not attend the funeral. They didn't even send a note to say sorry about grandma's death. Like, they are estranged. And so obviously the kids are where they are. And the psychology behind that is a whole nother story. That's a whole nother day. We could talk about that for hours. But I knew in my mind that that's where they stand. Like, it was obvious. They are against anybody who is seeking justice for JJ, Tylee, and ironically, their mother, Tammy. And so I was like, during the sleepover outside the courthouse, I was looking to see if any of the Daybell children might be there or their friends or whatever. Okay, another story that I heard about during the time. I don't know if I should tell this one. There's some of them that I don't want to say just because I don't want to get anyone in trouble or threatened. So I'm going to be vague with this one. But let me just say this. There was a young lady who met one of the Daybell sons and had a very awkward encounter. Let's just say that. Yep, that's all I'm going to say about that. Let's just say that. And again, I'm not throwing stones at the Daybell kids. They did not do this. That is 100% sure. They did not do this. So I think that we need to give them some slack. But the only reason why I bring it up is just to say that they've been indoctrinated by their dad into believing some crazy things. I'm leaving it there. Okay, let's move on. Okay, so basically, there was somebody who set up a table and put some snacks on it. And then it became like a potluck snack table, and everyone was sharing. And I literally was like, this feels like a slumber party. I mean, it was actually, I cringe to even say it, but it was actually fun. We were having fun. We were snacking. A couple of us decided, hey, let's go for a walk. I mean, we have all night. It was a nice night. It wasn't very cold. And like, let's go for a walk. We'll go to Maverick and we'll get a little snack to contribute to the table. They did have porta potties there, but sometimes it's nice to go to a restroom. So we walked there and had a lovely time together. Brought back the snacks, and literally there was a lot of loud talking and laughing and joy. There was joy. So I did not expect that, not in the least. There was at one point we were talking and there was a lady, and I happened to notice, I just was kind of, we all put our chairs in a great big circle and we were just talking. Those of us who weren't going to sleep. There were some people who had their cots and little pop-up tents and they like put on earplugs, eye mask, and literally went to sleep. And I'm sure those are the ones who had to be on air in the morning, if you know what I'm saying. But the rest of us were having a pretty good time. And at one point I was looking in our circle and I noticed there was this lady, and oh my, she looked a lot like Lori, except really pretty, but she did look like Lori. And I was just kind of like, oh my word, that's kind of shocking that this person looks so much like Lori. Well, later on, she shows me, come to find out, a lot of people have told her that. And she lives right in Rexburg, if I remember right, somewhere right there in the area. And she, for Halloween, dressed up as Lori, had a striped jumpsuit, did her hair just like Lori, and she showed me the picture and the side by side. You know how much I like side by sides. The side by side of her and Lori, and they looked like twins. And as she was walking around, no, she didn't look like a twin. She looked like her. And again, except she was prettier. But she was walking around, and reports were being called in that Lori had escaped from prison or jail because she looked so much like her. But this is the kind of thing. We were just having fun because it's kind of like, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Still Magnolia, but even if you haven't seen Still Magnolias, if you've seen a movie where there's like this really stressful situation and awful thing, something awful's happened, and then you're so tense, you're so tense, and then all of a sudden there's like some little joke, and you're about to cry, if not crying, because of the stress of the movie, and then all of a sudden there's a joke, and you're just like laughing, like belly laugh. And it's funny, but it maybe wouldn't have been so funny if you weren't already majorly stressed. And I feel like that was kind of what the ambiance was. Like everyone who was there, who spent that kind of effort to be there, has had this cooped up anxiety. So it was a way to relieve it and to kind of let your hair down a little. It reminded me of the day that I was at the trial in Boise. And again, this had to have been the worst day of all when they were talking about the remains of JJ and Tylee. And on that day, Larry actually went around with a bowl of lifesavers and said, during one of the breaks, would you like a lifesaver? Would you like a lifesaver? And it was, I don't know how to explain it. It was a little bit funny. And it's what we all needed. Certainly he did. And it was his way of lightening the mood a little bit because it was so awful. Okay, I have one more story to tell about the night, and then we'll get to the morning of. Okay, so this was kind of crazy. There was a Dollar General really close, and a lot of people went over before it closed at 9 and would get the snacks to contribute, or pajamas or whatever. And they were talking to the cashier there. And so after it closed at 9, that cashier came over and started talking to everybody. Are you guys okay? He actually brought over some candles that are those mosquito repellent candles. It was so nice of him. Like great big candles, because the mosquitoes were starting to come out. And there was like mosquito spray anybody could use. It was so nice, really. But anyway, he started talking to us. Come to find out, and I have a little clip, but come to find out, he had spent the night in jail just recently, and he was next door to Chad Daybell. He had this whole story about Chad, and the bottom line was this. Chad, we find out from him, who was an inmate with him, Chad is in solitary confinement. He explained what the room looked like, and I'll let that clip show. So there we have it. Solitary confinement, white walls, out for 1 hour a day by himself, and that's it. Now, I don't know if that's the way it's been for Lori or not, but it's interesting. Now that Lori's in the state pen, be different than even in the jail, and I'm going to talk about that later. In the morning, about 5 o'clock, I was number 43, and 43 was the last number given that night. After that, everybody else is like, that came, they realized, oh, I'd have to be 44, and they say there's 30 spots. I'm not getting in, and they gave it up, and they left. So in the morning, around 5 in the morning, people started coming, and with the same idea that I had, I'll try at 5, and then I'll see, rather than staying all night. So as people were coming, number 44, number 45, and 46 got there between 5 and 6 a.m. And so from 5 until we went into the court, 9:30, we were standing in line. And really, but when people started showing up at 5, everyone went ahead and got in numerical order and started standing in line. So we were standing in line, and you could have your chair there if you wanted, but we were then, from our little circle party atmosphere, things started getting more serious. We were in line. more people started coming and went ahead and got some tickets. I think they went up to 50 maybe, and then they said no more tickets. There's no way it's going past 50. But anyway, okay, so these people were in line. The people that were right behind me, I got to talk to for 4 hours or so, one of which was the one person that I had been hoping to meet throughout this whole thing. And that was somebody who was tied in with the prepper group that Chad and Lori were going to all those conferences and reading all the books and all that. She was in that group. And oh boy, does she have insight. This is amazing. And I'm not even going to try to tell her story. I'm going to be interviewing her within the next week, and I will post it here. But it's kind of crazy to really finally see the inside from that perspective, because everything that I've tried to find, those people who were involved in that group have disassociated with Chad and Lori tremendously and act like they were never in or they never believed or whatever. And so it'll be so nice because this person knows, let's just say, they know. And one thing that I have done with quite a few of my videos prior is I keep on thinking, like, especially the Melanies, Melanie Pulowski, Melanie Gibb, Warwick, whatever. I'm like, why aren't they liable for anything? Why? Yeah. So we will get some inside story as to why, what, where, how, all of it. So I'm holding that one for another day. But suffice it to say, I learned a lot from her. And then there was another lady who I had seen at the courthouse in Boise when I went to the trial. She went to the trial every single day except one. She got in every day but one. She must have had fast fingers because I tried to get in and I only got in one, and she went every day but one. And she sat right behind Lori the entire time. So she could hear a lot of what Lori would whisper. She could see sometimes what Lori was writing down. She has an inside scoop like nobody else. And she's also going to do an interview with me. So looking forward to some insights about that. Then the third person that I was talking to was actually a producer for CBS, and she was from LA. And it was really interesting to talk to her too, because she goes from case to case to case, and that's her job. And like Johnny Depp case, Brian Koberger, like all of them, all the high profile cases, she goes. She's a producer, so she's not one that any of you have probably seen anywhere, but she knows a lot. And when I asked her about our ticket system, I'm like, have you ever seen anything like this before, where someone writes on a piece of paper? This is the one thing that I learned from her, and that is it's very common. So it shows you what I know. It's very common. And it obviously worked. It worked splendidly. So, see, learned something new. I thought it was a little Idaho thing, but apparently not. Okay, so let's talk about the actual go into the courtroom. As they started to let people in, they got all the people. I think there were 5 jurors that came, the appointed family, any of the investigators that wanted to go automatically got a seat. So by the time everyone was seated, then they could start letting people go in. And it took a little while. I don't know if any of you were watching live, but it started late. Well, that's because they were starting to let people that from the outside in, and they had to go through, it's like going through airline security. You had to go through that to get in. And they would do like 10 at a time. So you 10 can go. Okay, now we can take 5 more. Okay, they fit in. Now we can take 3 more. And anyway, it was going. It ended up being like 6 ahead of me when they finally said no more. So I'm like, oh no. But again, I felt like it was worth it to be there because of all the insights that I got. So they had an overflow area, and it wasn't very far to go, that you could go watch, and you just watch like the rest of you could watch. But the difference was we were watching with a lot of family members of Kay and Larry, because only a few were allowed in the courthouse. And so there were a lot of close connections of people who were in that overflow with us. The second thing was the overflow was very nicely air conditioned and comfortable soft seats, and it was a pleasant place to watch it. We were still under the same regulations as the courthouse. Like you weren't supposed to have facial expression or shout out or make, whatever. And for the most part, we did pretty good. But every once in a while, you couldn't help yourself without just going, "What is happening?" And we didn't get in too much trouble for doing that. But and then those of us that were in there, we were given a bracelet, and it says "Justice for Tylee, JJ, and Charles." And this was given by Kay Woodcock's sister. She gave us all these bracelets, and I just think it's so sweet. I just absolutely like, yes, I will wear it. I'm not an official reporter, so I can do it. I know that a lot of the reporters couldn't. They have to stay neutral. And I'll be honest, I'm not at this point. I'm going to try my best with future cases to be neutral. I'm not neutral here. Like, I'm wearing my bracelet. So there you go. So we sat there, and during the breaks, we were able to go out. There was a little soda, what do you call those, soda bar right next door. We were able to go get a drink and come back. It was just fine. I wasn't sad at all. We were able to see and feel and hear. So it was satisfying. I still appreciated that. So the only downfall was it's hard to see Lori's reactions. And really, when I got home, I rewatched it, and it's still hard to see. I did an edit of the entire thing, and I made it so it was more zoomed in on Lori. You can still see the judge's reactions, but zoomed in. So if you'd like to watch the entire sentencing hearing, you can click on the video and watch it all a little bit more zoomed in. The quality is still what the quality was. The courtroom cameras weren't the best. After the sentencing was over, we went back over to the courthouse and waited for Kay and Larry to come out with every other press I've ever seen. I've never seen so much press in my life. I mean, it was phenomenal. Everyone was interested. And then my friends who did make it in, one night of a slumber party, we became really close friends. Those that made it in came and told me that it was actually really awful in the courthouse because I don't think the air conditioning could keep up with that many people just crammed into a room. So it was really hot and crammed, and they couldn't really see anything because there were so many people. So they couldn't see Lori's face at all, and they really couldn't see the victim impact statements. They couldn't see which we don't see them either because the camera is on the judge and on Lori, so you don't get to see the victims, but they couldn't either. So worked out for me just fine being where I was. So that's that. Then after it was over, oh, what a relief. And now her next thing is they're already starting extradition for Arizona. She's going to go and be on trial for Charles' attempted murder and Brandon Boudreaux's attempted murder. So there's still more court for Lori, but her life without parole and literally without the possibility of parole is just, I think. I have an inside scoop with somebody who actually works in the jail where Lori will be for the rest of her life, other than her other court cases. And I'll be interviewing her in the future. Now, she can't talk about Lori specifically, but she can talk about the jail and what it's going to be like and whatever. Right now, in that prison in Pocatello, it's in Pocatello, Idaho, there is one inmate who is on death row, one female inmate, and that's it. She's the only one. So Lori will have some friends there, or she'll have some time there. One thing that is interesting is I had been worrying about the Idaho law and the mental illness part. I had talked about it a little bit. Like, what about that? What if that's read differently and she gets to go to a mental institution instead of jail? And oh, I was just waiting during the judge's statements. And when he explained that could have used some mental health issues as mitigating factor in your sentencing if you would have done that paperwork that I gave to you to do, but since you wouldn't do it, I won't even consider mental illness as a mitigating factor for a lesser sentence. So Lori shot herself in the foot as she's done with everything else. She cuts off her nose despite her face, and she could care less, in my opinion, about anything. The amount of lies, just ridiculousness, that's the only thing I can say about her statements, just ridiculous. She is friends with Tammy. Tammy visited her. She died on the, like, whatever. I think it's one thing that's interesting about her. The whole I died on the table when Tylee was born, so I have these visions of the other side. I get visitations from the other side. First of all, Chad's already used that one a couple of times. So, oh, now all of a sudden you have this near death experience that you've never said a word about before now. Yeah, we believe that. The thing that I find ironic about it is anyone can claim to have spirits visit them, and there's no way to verify. You either believe it or you don't. Whereas when she goes through and says that she died at the hospital, uh, that's verifiable. And I wonder if that will be used against her in her court case against Charles and Brandon, just because they can show her testimony of all the things that happened during when her husband Charles was murdered, and they could show this and show, look at how you lie. You lie just to lie. It's ridiculous. So, still more to come with her, but she's never going to see the light of day. That's all I got for today. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I got more coming. I'll see you soon.